Tears streamed down Sophia Larson's face as she clutched her worn leather valise, the last departing train's whistle fading into the distance as dusk settled over Empire City, Wyoming Territory, 1878. The wooden bench beneath her had grown hard and unforgiving during the 6 hours she'd waited at the depot, her hope diminishing with each passing minute. Her carefully planned future was crumbling before her eyes, just like the dust that swirled across the empty platform. "I'm here now," a deep voice said, causing Sophia to look up through tear-blurred vision. A tall figure stood before her, silhouetted against the setting sun. As he stepped closer, she could make out the weathered face of a man in his early 30s, his eyes the color of summer sky, a dark Stetson pulled low over his brow. His duster was covered in trail dust, and he wore a gun belt low on his hips, unmistakably a cowboy. "I'm afraid you're too late, sir," Sophia replied, dabbing at her eyes with her handkerchief. "My fiancé was supposed to meet me hours ago." The cowboy removed his hat, revealing a shock of sandy brown hair. "Name's Owen Quinn, madam. I work for the R Ranch outside town." He shifted uncomfortably. "Your fiancé, would that be Daniel Harris?" Sophia nodded, her heartbeat quickening. "Do you know where he is? Has something happened?" Owen's expression grew solemn. "Miss, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but Daniel Harris left Empire City 2 weeks ago. Sold his claim and headed east with a woman named Francine." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. Daniel had written to her in Boston for months, painting a picture of their bright future together in Wyoming. He'd sent her money for the train ticket, promising to meet her and marry her straight away. Now she sat abandoned in a strange town with little money and no prospects. "There must be some mistake," she whispered, though the truth was settling over her heart like a shroud. "No mistake, madam." "I'm sorry." Owen replaced his hat. "The station master asked me to check on you, said you'd been waiting since noon. It's not safe for a lady to be alone at the depot after dark." Sophia stood on unsteady legs. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Quinn, but I'll be fine. Perhaps there's a boarding house where I can stay until I figure out what to do next. Mrs. Whitaker runs a respectable place for ladies. I can escort you there." He extended his hand toward her valise. "May I?" Sophia hesitated, years of proper Boston upbringing warring with her desperate circumstances. Finally, she nodded, relinquishing her bag. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible above the evening breeze that rattled through the station's eaves. As they walked down Empire City's Main Street, Sophia tried to take in her surroundings through her veil of distress. The town was larger than she'd expected, wooden buildings lining both sides of the dusty street, gas lamps being lit one by one as twilight deepened. Men in dusty clothes emerged from saloons, while shopkeepers locked their doors for the night. "Empire City's grown fast," Owen commented, noticing her appraisal. "The railroad brought folks in, and the silver mines kept them here. It's not as rough as it was a few years back, but it's still no place for a lady without protection." "I wasn't planning to be without protection," Sophia replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Owen nodded. "Daniel Harris wasn't worthy of a lady like yourself." "You don't know anything about me, Mr. Quinn. I know you've got grit, sitting at that depot for 6 hours straight, and I know you deserve better than a man who'd abandon you." They stopped before a 2-story white clapboard house with green shutters and a neat front porch adorned with potted geraniums. A polished brass sign read, "Whitaker Boarding House, respectable accommodations for ladies." Owen rapped on the door, which swung open to reveal a stout, gray-haired woman with kind eyes. "Evening, Mrs. Whitaker," Owen said, tipping his hat. "This is Miss Sophia Larson. She's in need of lodging. Mrs." Whitaker's gaze moved from Owen to Sophia, taking in her travel-worn appearance and red-rimmed eyes. "Of course, dear. Come in, come in." Sophia turned to Owen. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Quinn," he nodded, handing over her valise. "Mrs. Whitaker will take good care of you. If you need anything else." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and extracted a folded piece of paper. The Triple R is about 3 miles outside of town. If you need help, send word. Sophia accepted the paper with a polite nod, not trusting herself to speak further. As Mrs. Whitaker ushered her inside, she caught one last glimpse of Owen Quinn's tall form retreating down the darkening street. The following morning, Sophia awoke in the small but clean room Mrs. Whitaker had provided. Reality crashed over her anew. She was alone in a frontier town, nearly 2,000 miles from home, with just $27 to her name. The money Daniel had sent for her train ticket had consumed nearly all her savings. After washing and dressing, she descended to the dining room where several other female boarders were already at breakfast. Mrs. Whitaker introduced her around 2 schoolteachers, a milliner's assistant, and a young widow who worked at the mercantile. "What brings you to Empire City, Miss Larson?" asked one of the schoolteachers, a pleasant-faced woman in her 20s named Alice. Before Sophia could formulate a dignified answer, Mrs. Whitaker intervened. "Miss Larson has just arrived and is considering her opportunities. Now pass the biscuits, Alice, before they get cold." After breakfast, Sophia approached her landlady. "Mrs. Whitaker, I must find employment immediately. I have limited funds." The older woman's eyes were sympathetic but practical. "What skills do you have, dear?" "I was a teacher in Boston. I also play piano, speak French, and am accomplished at needlework." Mrs. Whitaker nodded thoughtfully. "The school term is already underway with teachers in place, but Madame Beaumont's dress shop might need someone with fine stitching skills." She paused. "There's also the Silver Palace Hotel. They've been looking for someone to play piano in their dining room during supper." By noon, Sophia had secured a position at the Silver Palace, playing piano for 3 hours each evening. The pay was modest but included a hot meal. She would start that very night. Returning to the boarding house to rest before her first evening of work, Sophia was surprised to find a package waiting for her. Inside was a practical dark blue dress with a note, "More suitable for a working lady than your travel clothes. Consider it a welcome gift. Mrs. W." Tears pricked Sophia's eyes at the unexpected kindness. She'd need to have the dress taken in a bit, but it would indeed be more appropriate than her rumpled traveling outfit. That evening, as her fingers moved across the keys of the Silver Palace's surprisingly good piano, Sophia tried to focus on the music rather than the whispers she occasionally caught from the dining patrons. Word had spread quickly about the Boston lady abandoned by her fiancé. "She plays beautifully," a female voice commented. "Pretty thing," replied a male voice. "Wonder if she'll end up at Velvet Rose's place when her money runs out." Sophia's fingers faltered slightly before she recovered, pressing on with the Chopin Nocturne. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her distress. Whatever this Velvet Rose's might be, she had no intention of finding out. As the dining room began to empty after 9 o'clock, Sophia noticed Owen Quinn standing near the entrance, hat in hand, watching her play. When their eyes met, he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. She completed the piece with a flourish, then rose from the bench. "You play real fine, Miss Larson," Owen said as she approached. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I'm surprised to see you in town again so soon. Had business at the bank." He shifted his weight. "I heard you found work already. That's good. News travels quickly here, small town." He glanced around. "May I walk you back to Mrs. Whitaker's? These streets can be rowdy after dark." Sophia hesitated. "That's not necessary, Mr. Quinn. I wouldn't want to trouble you." "No trouble. I'd rest easier knowing you got back safe." Something in his earnest expression convinced her. "Very well, thank you." As they stepped out into the cool night air, Sophia pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The main street of Empire City was transformed after dark saloons spilled light and raucous laughter onto the boardwalks, and men in various states of inebriation stumbled between establishments. "I've been thinking about your situation," Owen said as they walked. If you're set on staying in Empire City, you'll need more steady work than playing piano a few hours each night. I'm hoping to find a teaching position eventually. The school board won't hire again until spring. He cleared his throat, but I might have another option for you to consider. Sophia gave him a sideways glance. What sort of option? My boss, Mrs. Rowena Rutherford, owns the Triple R. She's getting on in years and has been looking for someone educated to help with correspondence and accounts. She also has 2 grandchildren who need schooling. And you're suggesting I apply for this position? Owen nodded. Room and board included plus wages. The ranch is a respectable place, Miss Larson. Mrs. Rutherford runs a tight ship. Sophia considered the offer. Living on a ranch would certainly be a departure from her Boston upbringing, but the promise of secure employment and lodging was tempting. Why would you help me, Mr. Quinn? You don't know me at all. In the glow of the street lamps, she could see a faint flush rise on his tanned cheeks. Let's just say I recognize someone who deserves a fair chance. He stopped as they reached Mrs. Whittaker's gate. Mrs. Rutherford will be in town tomorrow. I could introduce you if you're interested. Sophia took a deep breath. Yes, I believe I am interested, thank you. The next morning, Sophia met Rowena Rutherford at the Empire City Hotel. The ranch owner was a formidable woman in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing gray eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they encountered. She wore a practical riding skirt and jacket that spoke of quality without ostentation. So you're the Boston girl Owen's been talking about, Mrs. Rutherford said, wasting no time on pleasantries. He says you're educated. What's your schooling? I attended Miss Porter's school in Connecticut, Mrs. Rutherford, and later the Boston Female Seminary. I taught at a private girls' academy for 3 years before. She trailed off. Before you came west to marry a man who wasn't worth the paper his promises were written on, Mrs. Rutherford finished bluntly. No need to mince words, Miss Larson. Half the women in Wyoming territory came here following a man, and half of those were disappointed. Sophia straightened her spine. Yes, well, that's in the past now. I'm looking toward my future. A hint of approval flickered in the older woman's eyes. Can you cipher, keep accounts, write proper business correspondence? Yes to all 3, madam. What about children? My daughter passed 5 years ago, leaving me with her 2 youngsters. They're bright but wild as jackrabbits. Think you can handle teaching a boy of 10 and a girl of 8? I've taught children of all temperaments, Mrs. Rutherford. The older woman considered her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. You'll do. I'll pay you $20 a month plus room and board. You'll have Sundays to yourself. We leave for the ranch at noon. Be ready. With that, she rose and left, leaving Sophia slightly breathless at the whirlwind interview. Owen, who had been waiting discreetly across the hotel lobby, approached with a grin. Congratulations, Miss Larson. You've just been hired by the most respected woman in Fremont County. She's rather direct, Owen chuckled. Mrs. Rutherford doesn't believe in wasting words, but she's fair and she treats her people well. He tipped his hat. I'll come by Mrs. Whittaker's at noon with the wagon. By noon, Sophia had packed her few belongings, settled her account with Mrs. Whittaker, and said goodbye to the other boarders. She felt a pang of guilt at leaving the Silver Palace without notice, but Mrs. Whittaker assured her that establishments like that were accustomed to staff coming and going. You've made a wise choice, dear, the landlady said as they waited on the porch. The Triple R is a fine outfit, and Mrs. Rutherford is known for being decent to her workers, not like some ranchers hereabouts. A wagon rumbled up to the boarding house, driven by Owen. Mrs. Rutherford sat beside him on the bench seat, while 2 children with auburn hair peered curiously from the back. Those must be my new pupils, Sophia murmured. Mrs. Whittaker patted her hand. Samuel and Margaret, good children at heart, though they've run roughshod since their mother passed. They need a firm but gentle hand. Owen jumped down to load Sophia's valise and offer his hand to help her into the wagon bed with the children. As the wagon pulled away, Sophia felt a curious mixture of trepidation and anticipation. She was leaving behind the last vestiges of her old life and venturing into something entirely unknown. The journey to the Triple R took nearly 2 hours over increasingly rough terrain. The children, Sam and Maggie, as they insisted on being called, bombarded Sophia with questions about Boston, her journey west, and whether she knew how to ride a horse. "Everyone at the Triple R rides," Maggie informed her solemnly. "Even grandmother, and she's ancient." "I heard that, young lady," Mrs. Rutherford called back without turning around, "and I can still outride you any day of the week." Sophia laughed despite herself. "I'm afraid I've never learned to ride, but perhaps that can be remedied." "Owen can teach you," Sam suggested. "He's the best rider on the ranch, even better than Caleb, and Caleb's the foreman." Sophia glanced toward Owen's straight back, noting how confidently he handled the team of horses. "Perhaps Mr. Quinn has more important duties." "Owen doesn't mind, do you, Owen?" Maggie called out. Owen turned slightly, and Sophia caught a glimpse of his profile, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "It would be my pleasure, Miss Larson." As they crested a rise, the Triple R spread out before them, a sprawling ranch nestled in a valley with a creek winding through it. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with several outbuildings clustered nearby. In the distance, cattle dotted the grasslands that stretched toward the mountains. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed. "This is what Daniel Harris gave up when he ran off with that saloon girl," Mrs. Rutherford remarked. "He was my bookkeeper before you. Not much good at it, as it turned out. Found him skimming from the accounts." Sophia felt her face flush with humiliation. So Daniel had been a thief as well as a liar. "Grandmother," Maggie scolded, "you promised not to talk about that. It'll make Miss Larson feel bad." Mrs. Rutherford harumphed but subsided into silence as the wagon rolled down toward the ranch. Upon arrival, Sophia was shown to a comfortable bedroom in the main house, adjacent to the children's rooms. The house itself was a surprise, well furnished with polished wood floors, colorful rugs, and even a piano in the parlor. "My late husband believed in living well, even on the frontier," Mrs. Rutherford explained, noticing Sophia's admiration of a particularly fine landscape painting. "Just because we're 100 miles from civilization doesn't mean we have to live like savages." After settling in, Sophia was given a tour of the ranch by the children. She met Caleb Anderson, the taciturn foreman, Rosa Garcia, the cook, and several ranch hands who tipped their hats respectfully. The Triple R employed nearly 20 people, making it one of the largest operations in the territory. Supper that evening was a hearty affair served at a long table in the dining room. Ranch hands ate first, then the family and senior staff, including Sophia. The conversation flowed easily, with talk of cattle prices, weather forecasts, and the children's amusing exploits. "Miss Larson, I thought we might begin lessons tomorrow morning," Mrs. Rutherford said as dessert was served. "I'll show you the account books after breakfast, then you can work with the children in the afternoon." "That sounds perfect," Sophia agreed. "I'd like to assess their current knowledge levels." "They're sharp as tacks when they want to be," Owen commented, giving Sam a wink. "It's the wanting that sometimes goes missing." The children giggled, and even Mrs. Rutherford's stern mouth twitched in amusement. Later, as Sophia prepared for bed in her new room, she reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, she'd been preparing to marry Daniel Harris and begin life as a miner's wife. Now, she was employed as a teacher and bookkeeper on one of the territory's premier ranches. The pain of Daniel's betrayal was still fresh, but somehow it seemed less important here, where the sky stretched endlessly and the future held new possibilities. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Owen standing in the hallway, a book in his hands. "Thought you might like something to read," he said, offering her the volume. "It's Wordsworth. Mrs. Rutherford has quite a library." Sophia accepted the book, surprised by the thoughtful gesture. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I do love poetry." "Figured a lady like you might miss such things out here." That's very kind of you, she hesitated. Mr. Quinn, why did you come to the depot that day? The station master could have told me about Daniel himself. Owen's gaze dropped to his boots. I knew what Harris had done. Didn't seem right for you to hear it from a stranger. He looked up, his blue eyes earnest. No lady should be left crying alone at a depot, Miss Larson. With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Sophia staring after him, the book of Wordsworth clutched to her chest. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm as autumn progressed toward winter. Mornings were spent with Mrs. Rutherford, learning the ranch's business operations. Sophia discovered she had a knack for organization that the older woman appreciated. Afternoons were dedicated to the children's education, while evenings often found her playing the piano in the parlor as the household gathered around. True to his word, Owen began teaching Sophia to ride. Their lessons usually took place in the early evenings when his other duties were complete. He was a patient teacher, starting her on a gentle mare named Daisy. "You're a natural, Miss Larson," he commented one evening as she successfully completed a circuit of the corral without clutching the saddle horn. "Most city folks take months to sit a horse that comfortably." Sophia couldn't help but feel pleased at his praise. "I had an excellent teacher." Their eyes met briefly before Owen looked away, adjusting Daisy's bridle. These moments had been occurring more frequently. Glances held a moment too long. Hands brushing when passing dishes at the table, conversations that stretched into the evening hours. Sophia found herself looking forward to their riding lessons more than was probably proper. Owen Quinn was unlike any man she'd known in Boston. He was straightforward without being crude, strong without being domineering, and possessed a quiet intelligence that revealed itself in unexpected ways, like his knowledge of poetry or the careful observations he made about the natural world. As October gave way to November, the Triple R prepared for winter. Cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, supplies were stockpiled, and the bunkhouse was reinforced against the coming cold. Sophia threw herself into these preparations, determined to prove her worth beyond bookkeeping and teaching. One crisp morning, as frost sparkled on the grass, Sophia found herself helping Rosa in the kitchen, putting up preserves from the last of the garden's produce. "You work hard for a city lady," Rosa remarked, stirring a pot of simmering tomatoes. Sophia smiled as she sealed another jar. "I'm not much of a city lady anymore, am I?" Rosa chuckled. "No, but that's good. You're becoming a Wyoming woman, strong like Mrs. Rutherford." "I hope so," Sophia said thoughtfully. "I never expected to find myself here, but now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Rosa gave her a knowing look. "And perhaps it's not just the place that keeps you here, yes. Perhaps it's also a certain cowboy with blue eyes." Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Quinn has been very kind to me, that's all." Rosa hummed skeptically. "That man looks at you the way my Francisco looked at me 40 years ago, before he convinced me to leave Mexico and come north with him." Before Sophia could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Sam burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "Miss Sophia." "Grandmother says you're to come quick. There's a rider from town with news." Sophia wiped her hands on her apron and followed the boy to the main house. Where Mrs. Rutherford stood on the porch with a dust-covered man, Sophia recognized as one of the clerks from the Empire City Bank. "Ah, Miss Larson," Mrs. Rutherford said, "this concerns you as well. Mr. Peterson has brought news that Daniel Harris has returned to town." Sophia felt as though the ground had dropped from beneath her feet. Daniel, but why would he come back? "Seems his venture back east didn't pan out," Mr. Peterson explained. "Word is he's telling everyone that he's returned for his betrothed, meaning you, Miss Larson. He's been asking all over town where you might be." Mrs. Rutherford's expression was thunderous. "The nerve of that scoundrel." "After what he did, there's more," Mr. Peterson continued. "He's making some claim about Miss Larson having family jewels that belong to him, says she took them before coming west." "That's absurd," Sophia exclaimed. "I have nothing of his." The only jewelry I own is this locket that belonged to my mother. She touched the small gold pendant at her throat. Lying snake, Mrs. Rutherford muttered. Don't you worry, Miss Larson. You're under my protection now. If Harris shows his face at the Triple R, he'll regret it. After Mr. Peterson departed with refreshments and Mrs. Rutherford's thanks, Sophia retreated to her room, her mind in turmoil. What could Daniel possibly want with her now? And why fabricate a story about stolen jewelry? A knock at her door revealed Owen, his expression troubled. You heard about Harris, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Sophia gestured for him to enter, propriety momentarily forgotten in her distress. I don't understand what he wants. Owen remained in the doorway, maintaining a respectful distance. Men like Harris always want something. Money, most likely. He hesitated. Miss Larson, Sophia, I should tell you something about Harris that you may not know. The use of her given name caught her attention. What is it? Before he left town, he was in deep with some gambling debts. Dangerous men. My guess is he thought he could escape them by heading east, but they have long memories. If he's back, he's desperate. Sophia sank onto the edge of her bed, and he thinks to use me somehow. Owen nodded grimly. The jewelry story is just a pretext. He likely hopes to convince you to come back to him, then use whatever money or valuables you have to pay his debts. I have nothing of value except my mother's locket. Sophia touched it again, drawing comfort from the familiar shape. Harris doesn't know that. He just knows you came from a respectable Boston family. Owen's jaw tightened. Mrs. Rutherford won't let him near you, and neither will I. The fierce protectiveness in his voice warmed something in Sophia's chest. Thank you, Owen. He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture she'd come to find endearing. Get some rest. I've asked Caleb to post a man to watch the road from town, just in case. For several days, life at the Triple R continued normally, though Sophia noticed that Owen or one of the other hands always seemed to be nearby when she ventured out of the house. The children were kept close as well, their riding lessons confined to the immediate vicinity of the ranch buildings. Then, a week after Mr. Peterson's visit, Daniel Harris appeared. Sophia was in the schoolroom with Sam and Maggie when she heard the commotion in the yard, horses, raised voices, Mrs. Rutherford's commanding tone cutting through the din. Moving to the window, she saw a familiar figure dismounting from a handsome bay gelding. Daniel looked much as she remembered, tall and handsome in a conventional way, with dark hair and a mustache he was perpetually grooming. But now she noticed things she hadn't before: the calculating look in his eyes, the artificial charm of his smile, the way his gaze darted around, assessing everything for its value. Children, continue with your arithmetic. I'll return shortly, Sophia instructed, moving swiftly toward the door. Is that him, the man who left you at the depot? Maggie asked bluntly. Sophia paused. Yes, but that's nothing for you to worry about. Owen won't let him hurt you, Sam said confidently. Owen says he'd sooner wrestle a grizzly than let anybody hurt you. Despite her anxiety, Sophia felt a rush of warmth at the boy's words. Did he now? Well, let's hope it doesn't come to wrestling. With that, she hurried out to the porch, where Mrs. Rutherford stood like a sentinel, Owen and Caleb flanking her. Miss Larson, my darling. Daniel called out when he spotted her. There you are, I've been searching everywhere for you. That's far enough, Harris, Mrs. Rutherford commanded as he started forward. You're trespassing on Triple R land. Daniel's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. Mrs. Rutherford, I'm simply here to reunite with my fiancé. Surely you can understand a man's devotion to the woman he loves. Devotion? Owen's voice was dangerously quiet. Is that what you call abandoning her at the depot after taking her savings for the train ticket? Daniel's gaze shifted to Owen, recognition and a flash of fear crossing his face before he masked it. Quinn, still working as a hired hand, I see. He turned back to Sophia, his expression softening. Darling, there was a terrible misunderstanding. I was called away on urgent business, a telegram from my ailing mother. I sent word to the depot, but it must not have reached you. Your mother died 3 years ago, Mrs. Rutherford said flatly. "You told me so yourself when I hired you." Daniel's facade slipped momentarily before he recovered. "My stepmother, I should say, the woman who raised me after my dear mother's passing." "Stop it, Daniel," Sophia said, finding her voice at last. "No more lies. You left me deliberately. You stole from Mrs. Rutherford, and now you've returned because you need something. Money, I presume, to pay your gambling debts." Daniel's charming demeanor vanished entirely, replaced by cold calculation. "Well, well, the little schoolteacher has grown a backbone in my absence." He straightened his jacket. "Very well, let's speak plainly. I require funds, $300 to be precise. You come from a wealthy family, Sophia. Surely you can access that amount." "My family disowned me when I agreed to marry you and come west," Sophia replied, the painful truth still stinging even after all these months. "I arrived in Empire City with less than $30 to my name." "I don't believe you," Daniel snapped. "What about the jewels, your mother's collection that you were so proud of?" "My mother's jewelry was sold to pay her medical bills before she died. All I have is this locket." She touched the small gold pendant, "which I will not give to you." Daniel's expression darkened. "You're lying. You always were secretive about your possessions." He took a step forward, only to find his path blocked by Owen. "The lady asked you to stop," Owen said quietly. "I suggest you do as she says." "Or what, cowboy?" Daniel sneered. "Will you shoot me for speaking to my own fiancé?" "I am not your fiancé," Sophia stated firmly. "Any understanding between us ended when you abandoned me. Please leave, Daniel. There's nothing for you here." For a moment, it seemed Daniel might argue further, but a glance at the determined faces around him apparently convinced him otherwise. "This isn't over, Sophia. I need that money, and I mean to have it one way or another." With that ominous statement, he remounted his horse and rode away, dust swirling in his wake. Mrs. Rutherford turned to Sophia, her expression concerned beneath its usual sternness. "He'll be back. Men like Harris don't give up easily when they're desperate. What should we do?" Sophia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "For now, you don't go anywhere alone," Mrs. Rutherford decided. "Owen, I want you to escort Miss Larson whenever she leaves the house." Owen nodded, his eyes still fixed on the retreating figure of Daniel Harris. "Yes, madam." That evening, as Sophia sat on the porch watching the sunset, Owen joined her, settling into the chair beside hers with an easy grace that belied his tall frame. "You handled yourself well today," he said after a comfortable silence. Sophia smiled faintly. "Did I? I was terrified." "Couldn't tell. You stood your ground like you were born to it." "Perhaps I'm becoming that Wyoming woman Rosa mentioned." Owen's smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You were always strong, Sophia. Coming west alone took courage. Staying after what happened took even more." The use of her given name no longer seemed strange coming from him. In fact, it felt right, as though they'd moved beyond the formalities that had initially defined their relationship. "Owen," she began hesitantly, "what Sam said earlier about you wrestling a grizzly rather than letting anyone hurt me." A flush crept up Owen's neck. "That boy has a big mouth." "Is it true?" Owen met her gaze, the sincerity in his blue eyes taking her breath away. "Every word." "From the moment I saw you at that depot, something in me knew I'd do whatever it took to keep you safe." Sophia felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Why?" "Because you deserve to be protected, to be cherished." He looked down at his hands, strong and calloused from years of ranch work. "I know I'm just a cowboy and you're an educated lady from Boston, but I care for you, Sophia, more than I should, probably." Sophia reached over and placed her hand over his. "You're not just anything, Owen Quinn. You're the man who came for me when no one else did. The man who gave me a chance at a new life. The man who's shown me more kindness and respect than anyone I've ever known." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that transcended words. Slowly, Owen turned his hand to clasp hers, his thumb tracing gentle patterns across her knuckles. "Harris won't give up," he said softly. "Not if he's truly desperate, I know, but I'm not afraid, not with you here." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken feelings and possibilities. Finally, Owen squeezed her hand gently and released it. "I should check the horses before turning in," he said, rising from his chair. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night, Owen." As she watched him walk toward the stables, Sophia realized that somewhere along the way, her heart had begun to heal from Daniel's betrayal. And in that healing, it had made room for someone new, someone far more deserving of her affection. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with frost etching delicate patterns on the windows. Sophia dressed warmly and made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Rutherford already at the breakfast table, a telegram in her hand and a troubled expression on her face. "Morning, Miss Larson," she said, folding the paper. "I've had news from town. It seems Harris has been making a nuisance of himself, telling anyone who'll listen that you've stolen valuable family heirlooms from him." Sophia sank into a chair. "That's absurd. I have nothing of his." "Of course it's absurd, but it's causing talk. Sheriff Donovan wants to speak with you to clear things up." "Then I should go into town immediately." Mrs. Rutherford shook her head. "Not with Harris lurking about. The sheriff is riding out this afternoon." She poured coffee into Sophia's cup. "In the meantime, I need you and the children to stay close to the house. Owen and most of the hands are riding out to check on the north pasture herd today, but Caleb and a few others will remain." After breakfast, Sophia attempted to focus on the children's lessons, but her mind kept returning to Daniel's accusations. What was he hoping to accomplish? Surely the sheriff wouldn't believe such obvious lies. Around midday, as Sophia was reviewing Sam's geography assignment, she heard hoofbeats in the yard. Assuming it was Sheriff Donovan arriving early, she sent the children to get their history books and went to the window to look out. Her blood froze. Daniel Harris sat on horseback in the yard, but he wasn't alone. Two rough-looking men flanked him, both armed and looking decidedly unfriendly. Of Caleb or the other hands, there was no sign. "Children," Sophia said with forced calm, "I want you to go into the root cellar beneath the kitchen. Rosa will show you. Stay there until your grandmother or I come for you." Maggie's eyes widened. "Is it that bad man again, the one who left you at the depot?" "Yes, and he's brought friends. Go now, quickly and quietly." Once the children were safely away, Sophia hurried to Mrs. Rutherford's study, where the older woman was already loading a shotgun. "I saw them," Mrs. Rutherford said grimly. "Harris must have been watching the ranch. He waited until most of the men were gone." "Where's Caleb?" "He and the others rode out to check the east fence line an hour ago." Mrs. Rutherford hefted the shotgun with practiced ease. "It's just us, Rosa, and old Jim in the bunkhouse, and Jim's got a lame leg." A pounding at the front door made both women start. "Sophia," Daniel's voice called out, "I know you're in there. Come out and talk to me like a civilized person." Mrs. Rutherford moved toward the door, but Sophia caught her arm. "Wait, he has 2 armed men with him if they mean to harm us. I've been defending this ranch for 40 years, girl. I'm not about to stop now." But Mrs. Rutherford paused, considering. "Still, you're right that we're outnumbered. We need to stall until Owen and the others return or the sheriff arrives." Sophia took a deep breath. "Let me speak to him through the door. Perhaps I can reason with him." Mrs. Rutherford looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll be right behind you with this." She patted the shotgun. Approaching the heavy oak door, Sophia called out, "What do you want, Daniel?" "There you are, darling. Open the door so we can talk properly." "I think not. Say what you came to say." There was a pause, then Daniel's voice hardened. "Fine, have it your way. I need money, $300 by tomorrow, or certain gentlemen will be very displeased with me. These 2 fine fellows with me are representatives of those gentlemen, here to ensure I fulfill my obligations." "I've already told you I have no money," Sophia replied. "Then give me the jewels. Your mother's collection must be worth at least that much." "There are no jewels, Daniel. My mother's jewelry was sold years ago. All I have is this locket, which is gold-plated, not solid gold. It's worth $20 at most." A muffled consultation took place on the other side of the door, then Daniel spoke again. his voice tight with desperation. "Sophia, these men aren't leaving without their money. If you won't give me what I need, perhaps Mrs. Rutherford will be more cooperative. I imagine she keeps a tidy sum in her safe for ranch operations." Mrs. Rutherford stepped forward. "Harris, this is robbery you're contemplating. Think carefully about your next move." "I prefer to think of it as collecting a debt, Mrs. Rutherford. Your former bookkeeper, remember? I know exactly how much cash you keep on hand. And I know exactly how long the territorial prison sentences are for armed robbery," she retorted. Daniel's laugh held no humor. "A risk I'm willing to take, considering the alternative. My associates here are not known for their patience or mercy." A new voice, rough and menacing, called out, "You've got 1 minute to open this door or we're coming in by force." Sophia and Mrs. Rutherford exchanged alarmed glances. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. "The back door," Mrs. Rutherford whispered. "Go to the root cellar with the children." "I'll hold them off." "I won't leave you," Sophia protested. Their whispered argument was cut short by a tremendous crash as something heavy slammed against the front door. The solid oak held, but the hinges groaned ominously. "Upstairs," Mrs. Rutherford hissed, pushing Sophia toward the staircase. "My bedroom has a lock. Go." As Sophia hesitated, torn between flight and staying with the older woman, another crash came, splintering the door frame. She turned and raced up the stairs, Mrs. Rutherford right behind her. Just as the door gave way with a final splintering crack, they reached Mrs. Rutherford's bedroom and slammed the door, turning the key in the lock and pushing a heavy dresser against it for good measure. The bedroom window overlooked the front yard, where Daniel's horse and those of his companions stood tied to the hitching post. "We need to signal for help," Sophia said, moving to the window. "The rifle," Mrs. Rutherford replied, pointing to a cabinet beside her bed. 3 shots in quick succession is our distress signal. The men should hear it, even at the north pasture." Sophia retrieved the rifle, her hands shaking slightly but determined. As Mrs. Rutherford braced the shotgun against her shoulder, aiming at the bedroom door where heavy footsteps could now be heard on the stairs, Sophia opened the window and fired 3 shots into the air. The report of the rifle echoed across the valley, startling the horses below. Sophia prayed that Owen and the others would hear and understand. "They're coming back," a voice shouted from below, not Daniel's, but one of his companions. "Riders coming fast from the north, how many?" Daniel's voice, tense with fear. "Too many, we need to go now." Sophia and Mrs. Rutherford exchanged triumphant glances as the sounds of hasty retreat filtered up from downstairs. Moving carefully to the window, they watched as Daniel and his 2 associates mounted their horses and galloped away from the ranch, heading east toward the foothills. Minutes later, Owen burst into the yard with 6 ranch hands, all armed and riding hard. Seeing the broken front door, Owen leapt from his horse before it had fully stopped and raced into the house, calling Sophia's name with raw panic in his voice. "Up here," Sophia called, already moving the dresser away from the door. "We're unharmed." Owen took the stairs 2 at a time, reaching the landing just as Sophia emerged from the bedroom. Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could scarcely breathe. "When I heard the shots," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "We're fine," Sophia assured him, returning his embrace. Mrs. Rutherford thought to use the distress signal. Owen released her reluctantly, turning to the older woman with respect. "Quick thinking, madam," Mrs. Rutherford nodded, her usual composure returning. "Harris and his thugs fled east when they saw you coming. I imagine they're halfway to the territorial line by now. Caleb and 2 men are already tracking them," Owen replied. "The sheriff was on his way here when we passed him. He's likely to join the pursuit." Later that evening, with the front door temporarily repaired and the children safely back upstairs in their beds, Sophia sat in the parlor with Owen and Mrs. Rutherford. Sheriff Donovan had come and gone, taking statements and promising to telegraph neighboring counties to watch for Daniel and his companions. "I doubt Harris will show his face in Wyoming territory again," the sheriff had said. Men like that tend to keep running once they start. You were very brave today, Owen said softly to Sophia as Mrs. Rutherford dozed in her chair by the fire, the excitement of the day having finally caught up with her. I was terrified, Sophia admitted, but I couldn't let him hurt Mrs. Rutherford or the children. Owen took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. That's what bravery is, being afraid but acting anyway, Sophia smiled, feeling the last of the day's tension leaving her body. I've been thinking, Owen, about what happened with Daniel, about my life here. And his blue eyes were intent on her face. And I realize now that coming west was the right decision, even if my reasons were wrong. If I hadn't come, I wouldn't have found the triple R, I wouldn't have found you. Owen's expression softened. Sophia, I need to say something that's been on my mind for some time now. He took a deep breath. I care for you, deeply, more than I thought possible. I know it might be too soon after everything with Harris, but Sophia pressed her fingers gently against his lips, silencing him. It's not too soon. What I felt for Daniel was infatuation, mixed with a desperate desire to escape my life in Boston. What I feel for you is different, stronger, real. Owen caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her fingertips, sending a shiver of delight through her. Mrs. Rutherford would have my hide if she woke up and saw me being so forward, he murmured, though his eyes danced with mischief. Then perhaps we should continue this conversation tomorrow, Sophia suggested, her own eyes reflecting his joy. During my riding lesson. It's a date, Miss Larson, Owen agreed, reluctantly releasing her hand as Mrs. Rutherford stirred in her chair. As winter settled over the Triple R, Sophia's life took on a contentment she'd never known in Boston. The children thrived under her tutelage, the ranch books were impeccably maintained, and her riding skills improved daily under Owen's patient instruction. Those riding lessons frequently extended into long talks as they explored the ranch's sprawling acreage, getting to know each other more deeply with each passing day. By Christmas, their courtship was official, with Mrs. Rutherford giving her wholehearted approval. About time you settled down with a good woman, Quinn, she told Owen bluntly at the Christmas Eve dinner. Was beginning to think you'd spend your life talking to horses instead of people. The new year brought news that Daniel Harris and his associates had been apprehended in Nebraska, attempting to rob a bank. The territorial judge sentenced them to 10 years in prison, effectively closing that chapter of Sophia's life for good. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Sophia found herself sitting on the porch one evening, wrapped in a shawl against the lingering chill, watching as Owen worked with a young colt in the corral. The easy confidence with which he moved, the gentleness he showed the nervous animal, the strength in his tall frame, all of it filled her with a deep sense of rightness. "Penny for your thoughts," came Mrs. Rutherford's voice as the older woman joined her on the porch. Sophia smiled. "I was just thinking how fortunate I am. A year ago, I was preparing to leave everything I knew for a man who ultimately betrayed me. Now I find myself grateful for that betrayal because it led me here." Mrs. Rutherford nodded, her shrewd eyes following Sophia's gaze to Owen. "He's a good man. Best I've ever had working this ranch. Loyal, honest, hardworking. Yes, he is. He's also head over heels in love with you, has been since the day he found you at that depot." Mrs. Rutherford's directness, as always, was refreshing. "The question is, do you love him enough to build a life here? Wyoming's not Boston. It's hard country, especially for women." Sophia considered this. "When I first arrived, I found it desolate and frightening. Now I see its beauty, the vastness of the sky, the strength of the mountains, the resilience of the people who have made their homes here." She turned to Mrs. Rutherford. "Yes, I love him enough, more than enough." The older woman patted her hand. "Good, because he's been carrying my mother's ring in his pocket for 3 weeks now, working up the courage to ask you." Sophia gasped. "Your mother's ring? But shouldn't that go to Maggie someday? I've plenty of jewelry for that child. Besides, my mother would approve of you wearing it. She valued grit and determination above all else." Mrs. Rutherford rose from her chair. Now, I believe I'll turn in early tonight. Perhaps you should take a walk down to the creek. I hear it's particularly lovely in the twilight." With that not-so-subtle hint, the ranch owner disappeared into the house, leaving Sophia smiling after her. When Owen finished with the colt, Sophia suggested the walk Mrs. Rutherford had mentioned. The creek that ran through the Triple R property was indeed beautiful in the fading light, its waters reflecting the pinks and golds of the sunset. They walked in comfortable silence for a time, their hands naturally finding each other. Finally, Owen stopped at a bend in the creek where a large flat rock overlooked the water. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," he said, helping her sit on the smooth surface. "I used to come here to think when I first started working for Mrs. Rutherford, 7 years ago. I was just a drifting cowboy then, with nothing to my name but my horse and saddle." "And now?" Sophia asked softly. Owen looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the deepening twilight. "Now I have a home, a purpose, and if I'm lucky, a future with the woman I love." Sophia's heart quickened as Owen reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that gleamed gold in the fading light. "Sophia Larson, I know we haven't known each other long by some standards, but in my heart, I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life." He knelt before her, the ring held carefully between his fingers. "When I saw you at that depot, crying because no one came for you, something in me knew that I wanted to be the man who would always come for you, who would never leave you waiting or wondering or alone." Tears blurred Sophia's vision, but they were tears of joy. "Owen, I love you, Sophia. I love your strength and your kindness, your patience with the children, the way you play piano in the evenings, how you've embraced this life so different from the one you knew." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here on this land that's become our home?" Without hesitation, Sophia slid from the rock to kneel beside him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes, Owen Quinn, yes, with all my heart." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a beautiful gold band set with a modest but perfect diamond, Sophia felt the rightness of it all settle over her like a blessing. This was where she belonged. This was the man she was meant to love. The journey that had begun with tears at a distant depot had led her, finally and irrevocably, home. They were married in May of 1879, when the wildflowers carpeted the valley and the cottonwoods along the creek were bright with new leaves. The ceremony took place at the Triple R with Mrs. Rutherford hosting half the county for the celebration. Sophia wore a cream silk dress ordered from Chicago, with her mother's locket around her neck and wildflowers in her hair. Owen, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, could scarcely take his eyes off her as she walked toward him on Mrs. Rutherford's arm. The old ranch owner had insisted on giving the bride away, "since I've practically adopted her anyway," as she put it. Sheriff Donovan, who was also the local justice of the peace, performed the ceremony beneath an arch of spring blossoms. Sam proudly bore the rings on a small cushion, while Maggie scattered flower petals with great enthusiasm, occasionally tossing handfuls directly at the guests to their amusement. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Sheriff Donovan declared as the sun broke through scattered clouds, illuminating the couple in what many later described as an almost divine light. "You may kiss your bride, Quinn." Owen needed no second invitation, gathering Sophia into his arms for a kiss that drew cheers and whistles from the assembled guests. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Owen Quinn, Sophia felt a completeness she'd never known possible. The celebration continued well into the night, with feasting, dancing, and toasts to the happy couple. Mrs. Rutherford, more relaxed than Sophia had ever seen her, even consented to play the fiddle for several dances, revealing a talent few knew she possessed. As the party finally wound down, with the last guests departing and the children long since put to bed, Owen led his new wife toward the small cabin that was to be their home. Located just a short distance from the main house, it had been a project they'd worked on together over the past months, Owen handling the construction while Sophia planned the interior. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn," Owen said softly as he carried her over the threshold, setting her down gently in the main room of their new home. Sophia looked around at the cozy space, the stone fireplace, the comfortable furniture, the curtains she'd sewn herself, and felt a surge of pride and happiness. "It's perfect, Owen." "Not quite," he said with a mischievous smile, pulling something from behind a chair, a small wrapped package he'd clearly hidden there earlier. "One more thing to make it complete." Curious, Sophia unwrapped the gift to find a framed photograph, a wedding portrait taken earlier that day by the traveling photographer Mrs. Rutherford had hired for the occasion. "Our first family portrait," Owen said, his voice tender. "The first of many, I hope." "Many," Sophia agreed, setting the frame on the mantelpiece before turning back to her husband, her heart full of love and promise. "This is just the beginning." Over the next 5 years, the Triple R prospered under Mrs. Rutherford's continued guidance, with Owen gradually taking on more responsibility for the ranch operations. Sophia divided her time between teaching the children, who were soon joined by her and Owen's own son, James, born a year after their wedding, keeping the ranch accounts and making their cabin into a true home. In the spring of 1884, as Wyoming territory moved toward eventual statehood, Mrs. Rutherford called a family meeting in the main house. "I'm getting too old for this," she announced without preamble. "Running a cattle ranch is a young person's game, so I've made a decision." Sophia and Owen exchanged concerned glances, though still formidable. Mrs. Rutherford had indeed slowed down in recent years, occasionally using a cane on days when her arthritis troubled her. "I'm putting the Triple R in your hands," she continued, looking directly at Owen. "You've earned it, Quinn. You know this land and these cattle better than anyone but me. And you," she turned to Sophia, "you've brought new life to this place. Between the two of you, the Triple R will thrive for another generation." "Mrs. Rutherford," Owen began, clearly stunned by the announcement. "We can't possibly." "You can and you will," the older woman interrupted firmly. "I'm not giving it away, mind you. You'll buy me out over time with fair terms. I've had my lawyer draw up the papers." She softened slightly. "Besides, someone needs to focus on those grandchildren of mine. And your little James needs a grandmother who isn't constantly riding off to check fence lines." By summer's end, the transition was complete. Owen and Sophia moved their family into the main house, while Mrs. Rutherford took up residence in a newly constructed wing, built especially for her, close enough to remain part of daily life, but separate enough to maintain her independence. The day Owen and Sophia signed the final papers making them the official owners of the Triple R Ranch was a milestone neither could have imagined when they first met at that lonely depot 6 years earlier. "Sometimes I still can't believe how my life has changed," Sophia said that evening as they sat on the porch, watching 4-year-old James playing with the ranch dogs in the yard. "If Daniel had met me that day as planned." Owen took her hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band he'd placed there. "Then I wouldn't have had the chance to fall in love with the woman crying at the depot. And I might never have discovered what real love feels like," Sophia replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Or known what it means to be truly home." In the distance, the mountains caught the last rays of the setting sun, turning gold against the deepening blue sky. A cool breeze carried the scent of sage and pine, along with the laughter of their son. From inside the house came the sound of Mrs. Rutherford playing the piano with Maggie, while Sam's voice could be heard calling the ranch hands in for supper. All of it, the sights, the sounds, the feelings combined to create a tapestry of contentment that Sophia knew she would cherish for all her days. What had begun as the most painful moment of her life, abandoned and alone in a strange place, had transformed into the greatest blessing she could have imagined. "I love you, Owen Quinn," she said softly. "Thank you for being there that day, for saying I'm here now when I needed someone the most." Owen's arm tightened around her shoulders as he pressed a kiss to her temple. And I always will be, Sophia, always. As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, their shared silence filled with the quiet joy of two hearts that had found in each other exactly what they'd been seeking all along, not just love, but home, purpose, and the promise of a future built together, day by day, under the vast Wyoming sky.